Good evening, Davis. Afternoon. This is Jim Morose, and this is Jim's Table Topics. So basically, today it's January 2022. So this is our 2022 inaugural show. So welcome aboard. I'm going to try to do my best. I know that sometimes, I pick up the speed. I go a little too fast, but it's tough. I got 1 hour, if I even have that, and then to undo the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of the things that you don't hear. You hear those 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's the same stuff repeatedly over and over again. I'm really getting to see a lot of that stuff because I'm kind of retired now. So, and when I find, when I'm looking at the news, I try not to pay too much attention, but when they spend the first 15 minutes, it's all COVID, we're all gonna die. It's kind of like, really, there's nothing else going on? There is, but, it's the narrative. It's all about the narrative, okay? So, again, that's why today's show is aptly named, what the heck is it named? It's named Canceled, Denied, Simply Not Allowed, You're Censored, okay? Because, let's face it, the big five, Facebook, Google, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, they have all these censors out there censoring what they think might be a falsehood. Okay, but again, what I thought was pretty funny I heard this week was that, the censors, if they were like referees in a football game, the funny thing is, they only throw flags and call fouls on one team. The other team never gets called a foul off. It's like when you watch the Senate hearings between Dr. Fauci and Dr. Rand Paul, and the issues and the things that come out during those discussions. They call flags on Rand Paul all the time. Foul, you can't say that's bad. No, fake. But Fauci, there's no fouls. But the guy's been caught in so many lies. But again, just for saying that, they may cancel this show. I don't know. We'll find out if we violate the censors, whatever. But again, so that's why I do the show. You need to have some balance. So you got 1 hour against. Last time I calculated the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week was 168 hours per week, okay? I got 1 hour against 168. That's all I get. And the others that are like me. We're what the Bible calls the remnant. There's always a remnant of people that are gonna be, trying to get people to, get to the truth, find the truth. That's what I do here. I know that, everyone has a different take, but science is science, and science is science, and so that's what we want to focus on. So again, because the show is, let me just get that again, canceled, denied, simply not allowed, you're censored, you're busted. and again, that's the narrative that is put forth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's a whole chorus of this, from Hollywood to the media, whether it's print media, radio media, CNN, cable news, and all that other stuff. You can point to Fox News, but even 60% of Fox News, half of the Fox News people just went to CNN because the other ones got all busted for all sorts of other illegal activities. But again, that's no big deal because it's that that's CNN. They can get away with that stuff. But there's good news that I focus on is truth, justice, and the American way, and the biblical Christianity view of life. And then there's the fake news and the narrative of the world. Okay, so you take your pick which road you're going down. So for the next 15 minutes, as I like to say, I'm going to focus on the good news. Or is it 10 minutes? Yeah, 10, 15. I'm going to focus on the good news. So before we get to the good news, I did have, David, let's go to the first slide. Like I was talking about, the narrative, we'll just talk about the, what do you call it, the flu, okay? We had SARS, we had the bird flu, we had, I can't even read that, the death threat there. more flu in 2005, 2009, 2014, 2016, 2017, and now we're into 2020, the COVID, And again, like all viruses, they have a life cycle. They come out and they're contagious and they're very deadly, and then as they mutate, they get weak and they're more contagious, but they're weaker, so then it ends up being the common flu. In fact, the CDC just admitted, again, breaking news, that all these tests that they run to see if you have COVID or the COVID don't really tell you actually have the COVID. It could be any one of these flus. It could be any flu, any virus, because it doesn't differentiate unless you get, you go in and get the real test. But most of the tests, so the data points aren't really correct. And again, you have to look at, the real science, not the narrative, because the narrative is the narrative. But at any rate, that's just one thing I wanted to share. And along with the narrative, there's numerous movies, futuristic movies that were written way back when, in the 40s and 50s. Even 1984 was written in the 40s. And so these movies kind of tell you, warn you about what can happen when the government goes out of control. And even though these were based on things that were happening, in the Russian Revolution and in the German Reich and all this other stuff, it's the same theme, okay? Excessive government equals tyranny, and that's what this is all about. So again, this is the world news, this is the fake news, this is the narrative. This is what, we're trying to warn you about. It's, if you don't know history, you're going to repeat it. That's all I'm telling you. So let's go into the good news, okay? So I want to focus on the good news for now for the next 10, 15 minutes. And again, every day, forgive those who hurt you, pray for those who need it, and thank God for everything you have. I do. I thank God every day for, my family, my health, and just life in general. And God, every day is a gift, and I try to use it as wisely as I can. And last show, I was stymied. I had a mental block. I turned into Joe Biden for a moment, and I couldn't think of C.S. Lewis's name. It was C.S. Lewis, who I was trying to tell you, along with Josh McDowell, who went out to write Christian books. They went out to write a book to disprove, to show you how bad and stupid and weak Christianity was. But each man, C.S. Lewis, who wrote Mere Christianity, and Josh McDowell, who wrote More Than a Carpenter, with all their research and understanding and research and learning about Christianity and the Bible and the truth and the facts, they became very good Christians because they learned the truth. And so that's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you, begging you, pleading with you to not just coddly accept this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, blah, 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 blah. You need to find out for yourself, because there's a lot of things going on that people aren't telling you in the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You'll get it on this 1 hour if you can find this. All 5 people out there, I love you. Thanks for watching. Okay, so C.S. Lewis says, to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable in others, because Christ has forgiven the inexcusable in us. And that's what the basis of forgiveness is all about. God has forgiven us for our transgressions and the things we've done, good, bad, and indifferent. And we need to extend that forgiveness to people that we meet, because we all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. We have to admit when we make a mistake, apologize, make amends if we can, and move on. Okay. And so, and again, it all brings us back to just Christianity 101. Faith, hope, and love. Faith makes all things possible. Hope makes all things work. And love makes all things beautiful. We have to focus on the good things in life and not the bad things. That's hence the good news. I know we've all heard this. Every time you go to a wedding, you're going to hear what is love. The world has a funny different meaning of love, but the biblical love is this. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. And it always perseveres. Right out of the Bible, word for word, Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. Again, that's love. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. And it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. I mean, how many times have you heard, remember when you did this? Yes, I'm sorry. How many times I got to say I'm sorry? Yes, I did it. Sorry. Okay. So again, biblically speaking, this is right out of Isaiah 9. Again, this is the Old Testament. So what we're talking about here in the Old Testament is that for unto us, this is the prophecies. We talked about this. In the Old Testament prophesies what would come, and the Messiah was coming and how it was going to work out. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And that's Isaiah. So that's what the Christmas story was all about. We just celebrated Christmas, and I love it. And again, this little segment here, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and they were. I understand that a lot of people think Jesus was peace, love, flowers, and happiness, but no, he was to we the people. He lived what he told, what he's telling us to do. Forgive the people, love the people. The leaders who were leading us wrong need to be held accountable. So if you go to Matthew and read, I think it's chapter 28 or 27, it's called the Seven Woes. Jesus read the riot act to the government of the day, and that's why they needed to hang him, crucify him. That's what they did. They had to kill him. So that's what it's all about. So, but again, that's the way, that's why Josh McDowell and C.S. Lewis, they thought Christians were weak, but when you go look and read the reality of the Christian story and what's really going on, then you'll really know that Jesus is not what you think it is. He is, or was. He was the Messiah. At any rate, so that's why I try to focus on, the Serenity Prayer, which is more than just the little cheap version, but I'm going to read it anyway. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. So that's the real full serenity prayer that they use in the 12-step programs. And so again, that's how we have to diverse ourselves from our addictions and from our sins and from our bad behavior and our bad ways, is to surrender yourself to God's will, even though we can never keep up and do what God really wants us to do, but we can try, and that's all we can ask. That's all anyone will ever ask. And again, the pastor at church kind of was talking about the peace of God, and he read this, and I just thought it was great. I wanted to read it to you all today. So this is a little piece. These little sayings with these pictures, it's beautiful. God's word and God's creation, you can't beat that. You can't beat it. And so this is Philippians 4, verse 7. I'm going to go back and read verse 4, chapter 4, verse 4 to 14 or 15 or 16. But, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guide your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Okay, so I'm going to read that all the way from verse 4, and that will be part of it. And it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving. Present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content. Whatever the, change the page. I've learned to be content, and no matter what my circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Jesus Christ who gives me strength. And that is the Word of God. And so the thing is, this was Paul writing to the Philippians. And so that's why he's talking about, thanks for thinking about me, but I'm okay. He's okay. He was in jail. He's writing this stuff. He's in jail waiting to probably be executed because that's what they did. All the apostles of Jesus Christ died a violent death, apparently except for one, which would be John the Apostle. Apostle John, even though they did try to kill him, they put him in boiling oil. That's how they killed people back then. It was brutal. They put him in, but he didn't die. So they put him on the island of Patmos, and that's where, because he was disfigured and burnt beyond recognition, but he's still alive, and he wrote the book of Revelations to explain all this stuff. Okay, so and Judas was Judas was the only disciple, apostle who actually had a degree. All the other ones were fishermen and tax collectors and what have you. Luke was a doctor. But at any rate, okay. So that's the good news, and I'm going to stick to it. We got to stick to the good news because it's just hard to do it without it. So, and again, Matthew, I'm going to close up with this. Matthew chapter 26, verse 41. Watch and pray so that you do not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. We all want to do what's right. We all want to help people and do what's good, but in our minds and in our spirits, but our body, and then when we meet the world, we fail to perform, shall we say? But we have to take action, and the action has got to be in tune with, civil discourse and the morality that can hold up to truth, justice, and the American way. I mean, that's what our culture is. Okay, I was gonna just make a few little let's have fun with the censors. I mean, if you read this, cause now we're going into the fake news and all the other stuff. So the good news is we just passed that now into the fake news. But here we go. So if you read this forward, you know what that says. So I'm going to call it DIVOC. Okay, so the new disease is DIVOC. I mean, if you had an illness like cancer or lupus or any disease, which is serious, no one, this is America. If you had a disease, you would, you'd be able to go read peer reviews of what other people think about what this disease is. You would go get a second opinion to make sure that the first doctor did, make sure that you got what you think you got. And you make sure that what are the treatments available? Is this the only treatment? Are there others? And then, if it's a communicable disease, then we would talk about the herd immunity. And again, this is a new thing, moving the goalposts that's come up with this new DIVOC disease. But if anybody speaks out against this DIVOC disease, then all of a sudden, if you have a peer review or a second opinion, you want to talk about what the goals and objectives are, or the treatments, the herd immunity, no, those have been canceled. Those have been denied. They're not, you can't talk about them for this special disease. Why, I don't know, but that's how it is. And how is it that pilots and doctors and nurses and health workers, and by the millions, do not want to take this treatment, do not want to take the treatment, but it's being mandated in all the blue states, and the mandates are now starting to disappear in the red states. So there are some pockets in the red states where they demand that things be mandated. But again, why would some people in the profession not want to? And because there are a lot of facts about these things that have been denied and canceled, and they know, but you and I don't know unless you dig for it. You got to dig for the truth. That's what I'm trying to tell you, folks. You got to dig for the truth. They keep moving the goalposts. I mean, I tried to find it online. I know that. Let's see, where am I? They got jokes all over the place, moving the goalposts. I mean, every time something happened, and oh no, herd immunity was supposed to be 75%. Now it's now we're way past it, but we're never there. They keep moving the goalposts. No matter what they talk about, it just changes. So and again, that's why it's very hard to make an informed decision when you don't have all the facts. And I mean, you heard the old saying, right? Do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. I mean, well, maybe wearing masks will work this time. No, again, if you look at the statistics and you look at the facts and the science between the red states and the blue states and the mandates of masks and not masks, of vaccine and whatever, it's all the same. They quote the same things. So that's you got to look at the science and not the political science. It seems like things are falling on the red and blue political science line, but not on the actual science line. In fact, breaking news. I just heard today on the Kuna report that, Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci have been going back and forth about all this stuff. But, there's major news about. There was 3 doctors from Harvard. Where were they from? Okay, hold on. Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. They were virologists who wrote reports that counteracted what Fauci was saying about the DIVOC disease. And so Collins, who is Fauci's boss, he's the one who wrote the song about, they're all part of the health organization there that Fauci works in, and they had letters that just got, emails back and forth that just got released, and so it just basically says that between Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins, we need to get together and debunk and vilify and undo all these truths that these 3 doctors did, and they vilified them and brutalized them in the papers. So you can, again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you will not hear that, but it has happened, and it's true. But again, that's why you really need to get your own information, because the narrative. And we live in a blue state. I mean, just to be clear, anyone who's watching this, I live in Danvers. This is Danvers, Massachusetts. If you dig a hole in Massachusetts, the dirt is blue for the first 300 yards. There is no red in this state, okay? I mean, we have a Republican governor, but he's a blue governor, okay? He's what they call, Republican in name only. So fiscally concerned. At any rate, so again, he follows the narrative. Okay, that's what it's all about. Following the narrative is what it's all about. So, again, we need to keep moving on, and so I do have 3 videos from PragerU. Okay, so the first one is going to be never apologize to the mob. You know, I mean, people, well, you know, there was an article in the Boston Broadside that's out just in the January 2022, and it's called the Imperial School Boards. Okay, I think we've all heard the stories of what happened in Virginia. Now this one, there's actually in Bourne, Massachusetts, there was another school committee that had a meeting, and again, it's all about this critical race theory, and what are they teaching, and what are they not telling you, and again, it's all these foregone conclusions. I mean, they demonize the parents. In fact, I believe that's what the Virginia vote was all about, is that they turned parents who go to the school committee meetings and speak out against all these things that are going on, domestic terrorists. Again, it's the narrative, it is pathetic, and we need to stop it. So we should never apologize for speaking the truth and asking questions and trying to find out. And so this is, you know, Paris Denard did a good little 5-minute video, and this kind of sets the baseline for what I'm trying to talk about. And then, yeah, we always got to keep following the science. Now, Brian Keaton is a rocket scientist, a nuclear physicist. He's up there, and he's a professor in Southern California at one of the, you know, so he's not some, you know, right-wing, you know, conspirator. He's just a regular scientist. And when you listen to how he describes what science is all about, it's not what we're being told at all. No, it's not. It's kind of like the opposite. Again, we're talking more political science in the narrative than the real science of professorships and doctors. But in the third video, 5-minute video, is there really a climate emergency? See, again, I kind of like bring this in because it doesn't matter what the subject is. The narrative is the narrative, and there are certain things that you can't talk about with the DIVOC or the vaccine or climate change or voter integrity and the vote. There are certain things you can't talk about, or you will be, as the title of the show is, you're canceled, denied, you are censored, you just can't say that. That truth will not be allowed to be seen. And so that's why you have to, it's like a treasure hunt. You have to go find the truth, because these guys certainly aren't, I mean, this guy is, but the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they wouldn't know the truth if they tripped over it. In fact, I just can't. I guess I came up with a new saying. I was writing something. I have a little little thing that I did, and I ended up writing this thing that I thought was pretty interesting. I said, sorry for my sarcasm. I said, but sarcasm is just a product of propaganda. You know, when you hear stupidity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you just can't help, you got to poke fun at it. And sarcasm is just a form of satirical comedy, okay? But again, without further ado, I just want to set a baseline for, you know, the reality of you know, what's real, what's fake in the climate change, in following the science, and being canceled and censored and everything else. So without further ado, I will be going to the videos. I'm doing this I'm driving the bus from this little screen here. So without further ado, we're going to go to the first video, which is never apologize to the mob. So here we go, people.
Neil Golightly had a long and distinguished career as an executive at Boeing, until he didn't. Gary Girls, had a long and distinguished career as a curator of painting and sculpture at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, until he didn't. James Bennett had a long and distinguished career as an editor at the New York Times, until he didn't. All three were canceled. Their careers, their life's work ended in a virtual instant. Golightly wrote an article 30 years ago objecting to women taking part in military combat. It was published in Proceedings, the magazine of the U.S. Naval Institute. Somehow it came to the attention of an employee at Boeing who found it sexist. The social media mob got riled up. Golightly apologized, of course. His views had changed in the intervening decades. But it didn't matter. He was forced to resign. Garrels conducted a presentation about purchasing art from more racially diverse artists by saying that he would still continue to buy art from white artists. This outraged the staff at the museum, who found his remarks smacking of white supremacy. Garrels apologized, of course. He should have been more sensitive to his colleagues' feelings, he said. But it didn't matter. He was forced to resign. Bennett published an opinion piece by Republican Senator Tom Cotton, arguing that if the Black Lives Matter-inspired riots continue to overwhelm local police, the federal government should send in the National Guard to restore order. New York Times staff claimed that Cotton's words were threatening. They personally felt endangered by them. They demanded Bennett's head. Bennett apologized, of course. He just thought the Times readers should be exposed to a different point of view. But it didn't matter. He was forced to resign. Former Times columnist Barry Weiss perfectly described the situation in her resignation letter shortly after Bennett's banishment. Twitter is not on the masthead of the New York Times, but Twitter has become its ultimate editor. This is the cancel culture that now pervades America. Yet, people on the left, the very people responsible for it, claim it doesn't exist. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez mocks those who fear its growing influence. "Odds are you're not actually canceled," she tweeted. "You're just being challenged, held accountable, or unliked." The representatives claim that this is merely accountability culture is common on the left. Don't believe it. Accountability means a duty to explain. Accountability involves confronting a person with their actions in a way that allows them to explain themselves or ask for forgiveness and otherwise continue the dialogue. The purpose of cancellation is very different. It seeks to bring all conversation to an end, to strike fear in the public so that no one else dares to speak up. That is cancellation, and it extends far beyond criticism. Cancellation involves social media mobs engaged in public shaming and the creation of blacklists. It seeks the destruction of the career and reputation of anyone who differs with a leftist position. The bullies, says social critic Douglas Murray, want to stop the rest of us talking or thinking. Virtually no one is immune. Not Kevin Hart, not J.K. Rowling, not Woodrow Wilson, not Drew Brees. Not the famous or the unknown, not the living or the dead. So many have been burned at the social media stake. One has to wonder if the mob is going to run out of victims. But this fire will not burn itself out. We have to stop it. How? First, if you ever find yourself in the cancel culture crosshairs, don't apologize to the mob. Apologize when you've done something wrong, not when you've exercised a constitutional right. And furthermore, your apology won't save you. It merely hands the bullies another victory. Stand firm. The storm will pass. The mob always moves on. Second, find allies among reasonable people, not necessarily people who vote the way you do or agree with you on every issue, just people who still believe in free speech and are committed to open dialogue. Third, the rest of us must only support institutions and businesses that value free expression. Money talks, which is why cancel culture is such a potent weapon. People and even big businesses are terrified of losing their incomes. Finally, defend targets of the mob, wherever they fall on the political spectrum. This is a free speech issue. It should unite liberals and conservatives against the left. The very soul of our republic depends on an open exchange of ideas. We must take on and defeat a cancel culture that would hold a free people hostage in their own society. I'm Paris Denard for Prager University.
This video was made possible by a generous donation from the Jaquish and Kenninger Foundation.
Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
I'm an astrophysicist at a major university. Science is my life. But when I hear somebody somberly intone, "Science says," or "follow the science," I get very nervous. Science doesn't belong to any ideology. Science is the never-ending search for new knowledge. That's what science means in Latin, by the way, knowledge. Not wisdom, not morality, not social policy. Knowledge. What we do with that knowledge is where wisdom, morality, and social policy enter the picture. Knowledge, it turns out, isn't so easy to come by. And sometimes what we think we know for certain, the Earth sure does look flat when we're standing on it, turns out not to be so certain. Of course I trust in basic scientific truths, those things for which there is overwhelming evidence, like, say, gravity, even that humans play a role in the warming of the planet. But scientists, even the best ones, can get things wrong. The brilliant astrophysicist Sir Fred Hoyle believed the universe existed in a steady state forever and had no beginning. But his view, once held sacrosanct by all astrophysicists, no longer holds. It's been superseded by the Big Bang theory that the universe had a beginning and is still expanding. In the 20th century, some of the most respected scientists in the world, including Nobel Prize winners, believed in eugenics, the reprehensible idea that the human race could be improved by selective breeding. The National Academy of Sciences, the American Medical Association, and the Rockefeller Foundation supported it. By the middle of the century, it had been thoroughly rejected as quackery. No reputable scientist would have anything to do with this idea. So, we all need to get over this notion that just because someone, be it a politician, a bureaucrat, or even a scientist, employs the phrase "science says," means whatever they're saying is right. It might be right, but it might also be wrong. And if it's wrong, it won't necessarily be a bunch of scientists who say it's wrong. It might be one guy. Ask Einstein. 100 scientists wrote a book explaining why his theory of relativity was wrong. He quipped, "If I were wrong, then one would have been enough." It takes a lot to convince scientists to accept a new theory, especially if that new theory refutes what they had always believed. In some cases, what they'd staked their entire careers on. As Richard Feynman, one of the most eminent physicists of the 20th century, famously said, "Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts." What Feynman is saying is that a good scientist should always maintain a healthy amount of skepticism. Science is by its nature provisional. Science would stagnate if we merely accepted proclamations of past authorities. So how do we do good science? This is not a new question. Since the 17th century, scientists have employed the so-called scientific method to guide their work. It's not a perfect guide by any means, but it's pretty darn good. The method involves 1. Formulating a theory. 2. Predicting the evidence that should be found if the theory is true. 3. Collecting data. 4. Analyzing the data. 5. Refining the theory and presenting evidence to other experts. The philosopher Karl Popper added one more item to this list. Popper said a subject is scientific if and only if it can be falsified. In other words, if your theory can't be tested, if it can't be proven wrong, it's probably not good science. This is just one reason why we have to be very careful about putting too much faith in models. They often can't be tested. Models are predictions of the future based on current data. They can easily get things wrong. First of all, the future, in case you hadn't noticed, is very hard to predict. And the further out you go into the future, the less secure the prediction. Second, the data may be incomplete or even erroneous. It's human nature to want definitive answers, but science can't always offer those. Furthermore, science is not concerned with fashion, authority, or majority opinion. Case closed is not a scientific expression. Science is never closed. If it was closed after Newton, you'd never have Einstein. Science has to be first and always about pursuing knowledge, not about advancing a social agenda, no matter how noble it might be. Science has no political party. Of course, politicians should use the best available science to help them make informed decisions. But remember, scientific knowledge is not the same as wisdom. As the saying goes, knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So let's continue to look to science for knowledge we can use to improve the world. But let's not fool ourselves that science has all the answers to all our problems. It doesn't. That's one bit of wisdom this scientist can give you. I'm Brian Keating, professor of physics at the University of California, San Diego, and author of Losing the Nobel Prize for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Hubris is a Greek word that means dangerously overconfident. Based on my research, hubris fairly describes our current response to the issue of climate change. Here's what many people believe. 1. The planet is warming catastrophically because of certain human behaviors. 2. Thanks to powerful computers, we can project what the climate will be like 20, 40, or even 100 years from now. And 3. That if we eliminate just one behavior, the burning of fossil fuels, we can prevent the climate from changing for as long as we like. Each of these presumptions, together the basis of our hubris regarding the changing climate, is either untrue or so far off the mark as to be useless. Yes, it's true that the globe is warming, and that humans are exerting a warming influence upon it. But beyond that, to paraphrase a line from the classic movie The Princess Bride, I do not think the science says what you think it says. For example, government reports state clearly that heat waves in the U.S. are now no more common than they were in 1900. Hurricane activity is no different than it was a century ago. Floods have not increased across the globe over more than 70 years. Greenland's ice sheet isn't shrinking any more rapidly today than it was 80 years ago. Why aren't these reassuring facts better known? Because the public gets its climate information almost exclusively from the media. And from a media perspective, fear sells. Things aren't that bad doesn't sell. Very few people, and that includes journalists who report on climate news, read the actual science. I have. And what the data, the hard science, from the US government and the UN climate reports say is that things aren't that bad. Nor does the public understand the questionable basis of all catastrophic climate change projections, computer modeling. Projecting future climate is excruciatingly difficult. Yes, there are human influences, but the climate is complex. Anyone who says that climate models are just physics either doesn't understand them or is being deliberately misleading. I should know. I wrote one of the first textbooks on computer modeling. While modelers base their assumptions upon both fundamental physical laws and observations of the climate, there's still considerable judgment involved. And since different modelers will make different assumptions, results vary widely among different models. Let's just take one simple but significant assumption modelers must make: the impact of clouds on the climate. Natural fluctuations in the height and coverage of clouds have at least as much of an impact on the flows of sunlight and heat as do human influences. But how can we possibly know global cloud coverage, say 10, let alone 50 years from now? Obviously we can't. But to create a climate model, we have to make assumptions. That's a pretty shaky foundation on which to transform the world's economy. And by the way, creating more accurate models isn't getting any easier. In fact, the more we learn about the climate system, the more we realize how complex it is. Rather than admit this complexity, the media, the politicians, and a good portion of the climate science community attribute every terrible storm, every flood, every major fire to climate change. Yes, we've always had these weather events in the past, the narrative goes, but somehow climate change is making everything worse. Even if that were true, isn't the relevant question, how much worse? Not to mention that worse is not exactly a scientific term. And how would we make it better? For the alarmists, that's easy. We get rid of fossil fuels. Not only is this impractical, we get over 80% of the world's energy from fossil fuels. It's not scientifically possible. That's because CO2 doesn't disappear from the atmosphere in a few days like, say, smog. It hangs around for a really long time. About 60% of any CO2 that we emit today will remain in the atmosphere 20 years from now. Between 30 and 55% will still be there after a century, and between 15 and 30% will remain after 1,000 years. In other words, it takes centuries for the excess carbon dioxide to vanish from the atmosphere. And so any partial reduction in carbon dioxide emissions would only slow the increase in human influences, not prevent it, let alone reverse it. CO2 is not a knob that we can just turn down to fix everything. We don't have that ability. To think that we do is, well, hubris. Hubris leads to bad decisions. A little humility and a little knowledge would lead to better ones. I'm Steve Koonin, former Undersecretary for Science in the Obama administration and author of Unsettled: What Climate Science Tells Us, What It Doesn't, and Why It Matters, for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Okay, folks, so again, welcome back. I just, all these three videos are great in their own, light, but, this one here about the climate changes, it's just a fetish of mine, I guess. I don't know. I just really like this whole climate change discussion because when I was a kid, I remember going to the Museum of Science, and I brought my daughters there and I brought the grandkids there, and I pointed this out to them because the exhibit is still there. And there's a tree there. And the tree is over 2,000 years old. In fact, it's got a big swatch, so you can count the rings, and it's, they say that it's way over 2,000 years old. There's a ring that they say Jesus Christ born on this ring. That would be year 00 AD, okay, because we had BC and AD, and Jesus was born on that day zero. There's a little discrepancies there because of they did it all by hand back then, but at any rate, and then when you look at all the rings on that tree, you can see there's a cycle, and the cycle is 40 year. You can look at 40-year chunks, and the rings are really tight, which means it was a cold, low growth year. 40 years of not very good growth, and then the next 40 years. The rings are getting bigger and bigger as, it's a warming cycle, 40 years, and then it goes back. So every 40 years, you can see it. It's right in the tree, and it has a little pointer there that tells you that. I always tell people, when I tell them this story, that, someday I'm sure they're going to remove that tree because, again, we can't have those kind of facts out there. But this guy is right. These scientists, these professors, they're telling us, we need to look at what we're being told, and we really need to get a more understanding of what the heck's going on. That scientific method of, you got to be able to see it, prove it, and repeat it, repeatable, and observe and write it down and document it. These models are future, and one variable throws the whole thing off, and there's thousands of variables. I'll give you an example. When they did, this was in Arizona, they did the biosphere, right? They did the biosphere, and they wanted to see how people could live on on the moon. They put them in the biosphere. They loaded it up with everything that they thought they could use, they plant trees and this and that and everything else, and they lived. Some scientists, a bunch of them moved in, and there was two big problems that I can remember that you can't predict. One of them was, they got some ants in there, and the ants just went wild. They overran the whole biosphere. And number two, there was no wind in the biosphere. Okay, so all the trees and the animals that were in there, the trees couldn't sustain the animals climbing on the trees because the branches would break, because in nature, the trees blow with the wind. And so that blowing with the wind, the trees are alive, they go with the wind, and the sap goes up and down the tree. As the wind blows, the sap is the blood of the tree, and it keeps it lubricated, and it moves, and so it bends with the wind. But in the biosphere, there was no wind, there was no bending. The trees didn't get their exercise. When the squirrels and the monkeys or whoever was up there running around on the trees, the trees were brittle and they just snapped and they went flying. So again, when you have a computer model, you're going to miss something, okay? And so, no, if they could predict the future, they would all be winning the lottery and living on some island somewhere, and they wouldn't be putting up with all this stupidity. I know I wouldn't. No, I would, because I love you all, and I'm trying to give you the truth, justice, and what, you know, a little balance in what you're hearing. So, okay. Again, you know, we started out with the little chart of all the movies. So George Orwell wrote 1984 and 1947, but, you know, it was, so this is, he's talking about, you know, his future, tyrannical government. It was a terrible, dangerous to let your thoughts wander when you were in any public place or within range of a telescreen. The smallest thing could give you away. To wear an improper expression on your face itself was a punishable offense. There was even a word for it. It's a face crime, it was called. George Orwell, 1980. So, okay, so I don't know if you know who this guy is, but this guy is Nick Sandman, okay? He's still winning millions today. He was that, kid from Kentucky who was on a field trip with his high school, or I don't even think he was in high school. I think he might have been an 8th grader. And he was so enthralled, he bought this hat while he was on his vacation, on his field trip. And he wore this hat, and some professional agitator who was an Indian, native Indian, got his drum and beat the drum in this kid's face, in his ear, and just tormented this kid. And they got it all on video, and they made him the perpetrator. It was like Nick Sandman was harassing the Indian when the Indian was doing all the harassing. And so they misconstrued that thing so badly that, yes, he won CNN, and there was other people. Well, again, this is what happens when the narrative is just out of control. They find a story that looks like the narrative and they go with it. They're lying. But when they lose, they never tell you about it. So you'll never know. You'll never know. But welcome to 1984 and 2022 and 2020 and 2019. It's here. We're living it. Freeze, citizen. I just thought that was cute. I do see these things every now and then, and you can see it. Yeah. If you don't toe the narrative, we're going to, what are we going to do? We're going to cancel you. We're going to ghost you. We're going to censor you, and we're going to, cancel you. Which, again, the cancel culture is the opposite of truth, justice, and forgiveness. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them do the evil without doing anything. Albert Einstein. And actually, Martin Luther King had the similar saying and thought and sentiment in his, in his famous speech, I've been to the mountain. And he does say that it's the biggest evil in the world is not evil. It's that the good men stand by and do nothing and don't help. And so that's where we are, people. So isn't it strange? Isn't it strange how the media, like I said, the referees, they call conservative protesters potentially violent, but call all the liberal mob protesters mostly peaceful. Okay, so the liberal protesters that burnt down cities every night for hundreds of nights a couple of years ago, they were mostly peaceful. But one day and January 6th, it's the end of the world right there, right? And Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, and the whole Trump administration requested Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C. to get extra police here and fortify, call in the National Guard. And Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C. said, no. That was before this even started. okay? The president and all the president's men told them to beef up all the security around here because these weren't really Trump supporters. These were BLM and Antifa, and a few FBI agents in there that have been, again, you can't get the truth because the deep state is the deep state and the media covers for them, and we can't get the truth. But, well, yeah, sorry, people. It's just there. Okay, again, it's here lies New York City hospitality, died 2020. Cause of death, complications of Cuomo and de Blasio. I mean, these liberal policies, mandates, and all this stupidity that, and all the things that Cuomo and these guys done, and they're still not even going to be they held accountable. They won't. But that's what, these mandates are all about, and, in the blue states, but it's okay. So we talk about flattening the curve. Look at all these side effects of all these mandates. No one's talking about these, the unemployment, the bankruptcy, the suicide, starvation, drug overdoses, fentanyl coming over the border, domestic abuse, child abuse, the destruction permanently of the small businesses and all the restaurants and the depression and just the mindset of people. So again, the bad news is bad. The good news is good. Okay, so we got to, like I said, we got to start focusing on the good stuff. Okay, so here's just one more little, frivolity of stupidity. SpongeBob in his infinite, childlike, and then Big Brother took away all those evil guns from all the law-abiding citizens. And all the terrorists and all the criminals obeyed the laws, and everyone lived happily ever after. That's called imagination. There you go. Yeah. That's why we live in a republic, not a democracy. You can't vote away your rights. We are a nation of laws. Those laws need to stand. And if people are not going to enforce the laws, then they need to be voted out of office. But we have, not to fear, we got the Delitos, Zuckerberg, and I forget, he's the guy in charge of Twitter, I think. I think he just left. He either quit or resigned or whatever. Guaranteed censors, lifetime ban. They're the Delito brothers. They're going to delete everything. There's 3 more, Apple and YouTube. They're all doing the same thing. So again, it all just boils down to your vote. We got to vote. If you want to change the way Washington is working, you have to change who you send there. Because again, Massachusetts is the blue state. When are we going to, start getting some discussion of truth, justice, and the American way? We need some balance, people. We need some balance. And again, if I said it once, I said it before. The economy, our wallets. The forest was shrinking, but the trees kept voting for the axe. For the axe was clever and convinced the trees that because his handle was made of wood, he was one of them. It's a Turkish proverb, so yeah, there you have it. You can't keep sending the axemen to Washington, D.C. This is the bell curve, and so unfortunately everything is polarized. So what used to be the dead center, this is now extreme to the right, and now this is extreme to the left. There is no center. There is no center, thanks to the media and all this propaganda hype that we have to listen to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I'm out of time. I'm way out of time. The propaganda. The people will believe whatever the media tells them to believe, and good luck. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the media just helps all their people and demonizes people like me. And it's just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The greatest weapon is not a gun, it's a bomb, it's the control of information. Whoops, and I'm out of time. Lord, forgive me. I went way over, way past. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm going to end it on the good news note. We got to focus on the good news. My next show will be February 2022. And if you'd like me to talk about a specific subject or something, just drop me a line here at DCAT. And Other than that, I think we're just going to leave it at that. I might have one more slide here. Oh, yeah, that's right. The Matthew, we watch and pray so you will not fall into temptation. Spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. Lord, help us in all our ways. Good night, Davis. Love you guys. We'll see you next month.